This episode of Beer and Bullshit is brought to you by Woodhouse Brewing. Woodhouse's lineup of beers is brewed to perfection and best enjoyed in the company of close friends and family. Check them out today at the LCBO or visit them at the Toronto Brew Pub with a newly opened patio. Yes, welcome to the Beer and Bullshit podcast. I know you're tuning in for the very first time because this is the very first show. My name is Ben Johnson, and I am the host of this show. You may know me from such things as the internet, where I occasionally write about beer, mainly on a space appropriately named Ben's Beer Blog. I felt that we needed some more opinionated male shouting on the internet, so here we are. Now I have a fucking podcast too. The name of the show is Beer and Bullshit, and you can expect a healthy dose of each on this show. Every other week, I'm going to interview someone interesting related to the beer industry, and in the in-between weeks, I will be conversing with my good friend Chris, thus Beer and Bullshit. You can tune into the interview weeks if you like. You can turn into the talking with my friend Chris weeks if you like. You can turn into both. You can turn into none. I don't care. I'm not your dad. You do what you like with your life. I've got a pretty good lineup of guests scheduled to be interviewed for the show. But for my first show, I wanted to bring something rather large and splashy. So today I'm going to be interviewing Greg Taylor. Greg Taylor is one of the co-founders of Steam Whistle. He, along with Cam Heaps and Greg Cromwell, launched Steam Whistle in 1999. They are the three, I would say, now famous fired guys. If you've ever taken the tour of Steam Whistle, you already know their story. But they worked for the Upper Canada Brewing Company and were laid off when the company was purchased. And they went on to found one of Canada's premier craft breweries. Greg was asked to retire around 2017, and Steam Whistle has gone on to do some interesting things in Greg's absence, and now he's back. He's been asked to return. Greg is now, in title, the co-founder and CEO of Steam Whistle, so he and I had a chat recently about what it means to be back, the journey that brought him to this place, and what he sees for the future of Steam Whistle and for craft beer in Ontario. Give it a listen. It's the first interview, hopefully one of many. And thanks for tuning into the show. It has an online space at beerandbullshit.ca. It'll be the space where episodes are posted, and there is a contact form if for some reason you'd like to contact me or make an inquiry about this show. And without further ado, here's my interview with Greg. So you're back.
Yeah. So, well, it's been quite a journey, I'll tell you. It's, starting doing part-time deliveries in 1988 for the Upper Canada Brewing Company.
Yeah.
Time goes by so quickly, and left the brewery. I'm back now, and just really feels like the perfect fit. I mean, we started the business from nothing, right? So it really defines me to some degree as a person, and defines my career, and it's hard to leave that behind completely.
Yeah. I was thinking about this today. I mean, at this point, the three fired guys, I mean, most people in Canada know that myth at this point, but it got to a point maybe a few years ago where if I got one more, press release that a brewery was opening because some buddies were sitting around a campfire and decided to start one, like got to be a cliche, but I think you were probably have, actual rights to the first person to use that story in Ontario, given how long ago it was. But that is basically the legend, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like it seems like it happens every other week.
Well, apparently it's happened 1,000 times since we started, and it's true. I think that it's only natural that people would follow suit and pursue their own personal dreams, and I fully support anybody that does.
You built a company up that's probably Canada's best known craft beer company. And then you were at the point where you were, providing those talks and you got to that level. And then you decided ostensibly to retire, right? Is that the story? I mean, when you walked away, was it like, okay, this has been enough, or I've done everything I need to do with this company?
Well, to be honest, Ben, no, it was a situation where the board felt based on the direction the business was heading, that they needed new leadership. And, that may not have been the story that came out at the time, but, and, related to what we first talked about when I got on the phone, generally it's hard to find out what actually happened. But what I could say is that, the board at that time felt that leadership was required, maybe that brought new sophistication to the business, more professional management. And I will say it's often the case with entrepreneurs that as the business grows and scales, it's more difficult for those people who started the business from nothing to offer all the skill sets needed to continue to grow the business. And sales were not what they had been before. By 2016, the industry was struggling with so many entrants, and craft beer growth starting to slow down in the U.S. and in Canada, which really probably started in 2014. Larger brands who had naturally a larger share of the pie were seeing lots of competition, lots of entries, and when the pie isn't getting bigger, it becomes a tough battle. So as a result, Sybil and I left, and Cam stepped in and took over the business. And Sybil and I went on our way to other challenges in cannabis.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's why I didn't hear about it, because Sybil left and she was amazing at communications.
That's one of the reasons, for sure.
So this must be a bit of a, I don't know if you'd feel like vindicated, but I mean, it's almost like, okay, yeah, they need me back. It feels a bit like Steam Whistle lost its way, and then it feels like you're coming back to right the ship, at least from an outsider who doesn't know what the board talks about. But I feel like, I mean, Von Bugle happened. The Trolls got to have a field day because your slogan was always do one thing really well, and everyone's like, well, now you're doing two things. So were you there for that with when Von Bugle was developed and that strategy was developed as well?
No.
Okay.
So Sybil and I left prior to that, and prior to the construction of the second brewery. So, we left at a point where Do One Thing was still fully engaged, and again, the truth there is we worked at the Upper Canada Brewing Company, and when we started Steam Whistle, we said, hey, let's simplify the model, let's ensure quality, make it easier for everyone here who works every day to be consistent in what we do, and work on just making one beer better. Yep. Because we knew the challenges of having multiple beers and multiple SKUs, and that it was hard to believe, but the consumer picked up on that and said, hey, you guys are like, they started asking us, you're only doing one beer, like, what's that all about? And we said, well, it's about quality, but getting it right. It's not, especially with Pilsner, it's not easy to do consistently. In craft beer, it's all natural, you don't have any help, right? So it worked for us. My guess is that at the time we're thinking, if this doesn't work, if we don't grow our business, we'll move on to something else. But pretty quickly, Ben, it was apparent that we needed to increase capacity because we were selling a lot of Pilsner, and there were not a lot of craft Pilsners out there, I believe, because of those challenges with brewing a good one. So we just, 17, 18 years later, we continued to roll along, and then Sybil and I left the business.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting now. It's shocking to think about a brewery opening with one beer now, because I mean, now people are walking and they're running before they walk, right? They open with, they've got like 5 flagship beers. I'm like, I've never even heard of your company. Like, what is happening here? I'd still say there isn't a lot of great craft Pilsners on the market. It's definitely something that people struggle with doing really well. But I also always thought, like, the minute Steam Whistle needs to, you always had that in your back pocket. Like, okay, there's a second beer now. And I was a critic of the way the second beer was rolled out. I thought it could have been done a lot differently. Like, this whole time you could have just said, okay, we're going to do 2 beers now. So the Von Bugle thing was a bit of a head scratcher. And then I guess you weren't there for this either, but this purity seal, like, I have had so much fun making fun of this stupid piece of tinfoil. But I don't, like, maybe you can't speak to the idea behind that, but it seems so, like, that was when I was like, something's up at Steam Whistle, because you guys have had you've been so aligned to greening initiatives the entire time the company's been in business. And all of a sudden you were just adding a piece of waste, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what's going on with this company. And to be honest, I'm still not 100% sure. I mean, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is like, what happened there? Like, was marketing, making all the decisions, which can sometimes be disastrous, or
So I guess, one of the things that I should say about that period of time was that I was not really involved. I hadn't, until I came back to the brewery, maybe 3 weeks ago, I have not been involved at all. Like I haven't, although I'm still an owner, I wasn't on the board, and I've had nothing to do with any of that stuff. Not that I thought it was bad or good. I just, so you understand, I had no
you're being very
involvement
democratic. I appreciate
in
that.
any of that. Yeah, I tried to do my best. So yeah, I will, in returning, Ben, and you come into a situation where the ship is different than it was when you were last at the helm. But it's my nature not to make any hasty decisions and start making choices that aren't well thought out. So,
Yeah.
I'm taking the time now. And in fact, I'll mention the foil top. I'll admit that I wasn't 100% sure what the idea was there. But it just turns out that in COVID,
I know.
suddenly people are saying, hey, this seal thing's a good idea.
I know.
Like, what?
I almost had to eat my words after the fact because I was like, but I actually want to do like I don't have the technology, but a side by side comparison of the bacteria that's actually on one with and one without. I don't know if it would show up or not, but I mean, I'm a germaphobe at the best of times, so I'm on Howard Hughes lockdown at my house these days. Like everything gets wiped down and sterilized. So maybe the purity seal, somebody
I
named
get
something.
it. I'm similar actually, but so this is what I'm thinking. If you see there's a video on an Instagram that shows the process, and the idea is, okay, so this is now like post COVID, or at least in COVID. You're sterilizing the top of the can, and then you're capping it off. Um,
Yeah.
so I can't tell you personally what's in there. We could do some tests, but San Pellegrino has been doing it for years for a particular reason, and some other European guys have done that.
Yep.
And my guess is the unfortunate truth about a can is it's sort of shaped as a great method of capturing anything
Yeah.
and ensuring that once you open it, it's going to go in your mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the downside,
It's a little mouse shit ashtray.
yeah, and even think about single cans in the LCBO or any environment where single cans are available to consumers. Unlike a bottle top, especially like ours non-twist, there isn't that protection until we brought that foil in. So, and I'm totally being honest here. This is where my thoughts are today.
Hmm.
It might not be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Now, when I come back now, and it is recyclable. I know it's a small piece. So if you had asked me this a year ago, I would have gone, listen, I'm not even, no comment, right?
Yeah.
But hey, I will. Consumers have said to me, friends have said, this is actually the case. So I pulled this off, and this is all mine now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. Maybe it was somebody knew something was coming before we did. So since Von Bugel and the Purity Seal, there has been another beer added to the lineup. Do you think this will be a direction that Steamos will continue to take under you? Or, I mean, like maybe it's too early for you to say, but ostensibly you've got, well, 4 beers given the contract with Fat Tire, if you wanted to count that, but Steamos is doing a lot these days.
Yeah, and you're talking to the do one thing guy.
Yeah, exactly.
So for me, what I've always felt was important is to simplify the equation.
Yeah.
And so what I will say is that we're currently on hold in terms of launching anything new.
Okay.
I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of introducing brands that have been introduced just in the last year. So, let's see what happens there, and gives me some time to get settled in and understand the thought behind introducing the new brands, and also see how well they're doing. I mean, we've some of the new brands that have been introduced have potentially a great future, and I don't want to get in the way of that. There's just no way I'm going to allow that to happen. So I'm in a great position to just let's see how things go, and post-COVID, it's a whole new world.
Yeah.
The one thing is no question, it's behind us now. I think without it, we wouldn't have become, from my perspective, the most popular, not only craft brand, but a premium brand in the country. So it's provided a great opportunity to us, and it's all up from here. I tell you right now, fingers crossed, our sales have been amazing in
Yeah.
COVID. I think in particular because we're a trusted brand, and we have multi-packs, larger packs in the beer store.
Yeah.
Um, so sales are great. And
It seems to be the style people are craving. Like I have been less adventurous in COVID times. Like I would love a pilsner or a lager. I don't know if people are going back to what they know and what's like the comfort food version of beer, but I feel like there's been a lot of like lager sales and pilsner sales, and I'm not like splurging on crazy barrel aged stuff while I'm sitting at home during the pandemic. And I've heard other people say similar things. So maybe you're well positioned there.
I think maybe that might be the case. There's like you mentioned, comfort food. The truth is that Steam Whistle has always been a gateway craft beer, and I think we're responsible for bringing quite a few people into the space that
Hmm.
have, were first, everybody at one point. I mean, I drank Labatt's Blue when I was in high school,
Hmm.
and so at some point, everyone takes that step. And I think over the last 20 years, a lot of people have taken that first step with Steam Whistle and other gateway craft beers that are out there. Um, but it just so happens now that there's comfort in that, and also we're Canadian and independent and all these great things that are important to people nowadays. And the province is doing its best, and the Canadian government to try to promote Canadian and locally made stuff. So craft is in a great position, and we're fortunate to be in that situation.
So have you kept tabs? You mentioned the government landscape. I mean, you were pretty involved with the Ontario Craft Brewers Association before. Have you kept tabs? I mean, obviously the most governing bodies have other priorities right now, but would you say the landscape has improved? I mean, I guess you went from Kathleen Wynne to Doug Ford, who did give a lot of lip service to beer and mentioned beer a lot. Do you think that the landscape has improved for craft brewers in that regard?
Let me just acknowledge Kathleen Wynne for providing the OCB with this, Ontario craft brewers with considerable opportunities, specifically in the beer store,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the requirement for a percentage of craft sales in those stores, a minimum percentage of 20%. So, it's that has made a big difference. And the new government, I haven't been around.
Yeah.
I know they were interested in bucket beer, which isn't really an offering that the craft breweries are deeply involved with. Some of them may do it, but it's not a perfect fit.
I think you could say
But
roundly criticized. It was not
yeah,
popular.
sure, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think he maybe changed his perspective on that once
Yeah.
he saw where it went. But now the province is all about, and I'm back on the board of the Ontario Craft Brewers Association, which I'm happy about. And I mean, has a great history of lobbying for small brewers, regardless of whether they believed in it or not. Kathleen Wynne again Kathleen Wynne's initiatives are a good example of that. We were deeply involved with that. So no, I think it's, again, craft beer is very well positioned politically. I mean, it's a no-brainer. We're locally brewed. You employ your neighbors, all this great stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's all the talking points that you and I have known for 10 or 25 years in your case,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's interesting how the government never seized on it. I guess, lobby dollars talk. And we've talked about how Ontario craft beer could lobby better. So I'm still hoping that improves. And I'm glad to see that maybe someone's finally listening in the government, I mean.
yeah. I mean, again, you mentioned dollars. The Ontario Craft Beer Association is very limited in its funding because
Yeah.
the funding that it received from the local government is no longer available. So, but lobbying, dollars make a difference, but so does common sense. And we're in a situation today, it's just a lot of common sense to be investing in craft breweries. We have we employed more new manufacturing jobs in any other sector of manufacturing in Ontario.
Yeah.
So it's just so much opportunity.
Yeah, the job creation piece is a no-brainer. You're obviously taking a hit now. A lot of people have been laid off at craft breweries for
Yes.
temporary, but I
Yeah.
think you're going to need to push tourism pretty hard once we're on the other side of this too. And what better to bring tourism to Ontario than craft beer. I mean, every time I go anywhere, the first thing I do is seek out the local beer, right?
No, it's a huge part of tourism, and I think is really acknowledged these days. It took a while for people to realize people are coming to town, and one of their main priorities is to try the local craft beers. What?
Yeah.
You know, that's the way it is. That's the concierge. They'll tell you.
It's a different OCB than it was probably when you left. So I'll be interested to hear how things have changed from your perspective from then versus now. Folks, you know what I like? Beer. I know, it's shocking. I also like food. And there's nothing I like more than enjoying a beer and some good food that were both prepared under the same roof. That's why when I'm in Toronto, I like to go to the Indie Ale House. Located in the Junction, the Indie Ale House offers a beer style for everyone and an excellent menu. I don't live in Toronto anymore, but when I go there now, Indie is actually usually my first stop. The first thing I do when I get to Toronto is to go to Indie for a Nashville hot fried chicken sandwich and an Instigator IPA or even a Safe Word Pale Ale. Indie now offers free delivery in the GTA with a $15 flat rate for delivery in Ontario with a minimum purchase of 12 beers. Toronto's Indie Ale House. You can check them out in the Junction or in their second location inside Italy. Their new patio is opening soon. One thing that's on my list that I always want to talk to you about is baseball. I still have never get over you guys getting kicked out of the Dome. Like, you work so hard to get in there. It drives me crazy that the Toronto Blue Jays are the only team in Major League Baseball that don't make any sort of effort to support craft beer. You guys finally got in the door. I mean, you don't have to rehash the story, but I mean, I'm hoping that's still on your radar because it's friggin' right there. Like, it's right across the street. I don't know why you don't. If you guys could have a bridge with beer being piped in, it would be amazing.
Yeah, it was a great summer for us. It just was so natural. I mean, a lot of people come to the Roundhouse for a beer before the game and afterwards. Some people even stay during the game and watch. But uh, and then we were in there. You know, we were only in one spot, I think, but people were excited. It was nice to be considered. And again, I think you've said this before. We're the closest craft brewery to any major baseball field,
Yeah.
and yet we're not offered inside the building. So yeah, that was all I'll say about that is pure politics, right?
Yeah.
We were doing pretty well out of one fridge, but that was too much.
Yeah, I was doing my part.
Thank you. A lot of craft beer fans were, and again, even though we're a gateway craft beer, I think people acknowledge, okay, that these guys are legit. They have craft brewery across the street. It's all natural, maybe spring water. They've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
I'll support that. And so, we'd welcome have an opportunity to get back in there when things are come back to normal, and I'll connect with those guys again. But yeah, as you can imagine, there's a lot involved in sponsorship of that team. It's
Yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
get it.
the word Budweiser is written in right field in 15-foot high letters, so
Yeah,
there's no surprises there.
it's a big
It's
hill.
just it's just there's been so much lip service paid to the fan experience and improving fan experience, and it's shocking to me that there's always kind of like a flirting. Yeah, we're going to improve beer. They even sent out a survey to season ticket holders once asking if people would like an improved beer selection at ball games, and I was like, okay, here we go, something, and then nothing. So, I mean,
But
you can get,
Ben, I think, sorry to interrupt. One of the things, and I can't recall if we've ever talked about this, but it's actually the structure of distribution in the States that provides the opportunity that craft has. The distributors, they understand the consumer, and they're not about to just put a couple of beers in there. They're going to put a selection in there because they want to keep everybody happy. And they're also very smart to what the expectations are. And craft is a huge part of beer in the U.S. And it's part of what people expect when they go to the game, to
yeah.
any sports game now, right? So because the distributor has way more leverage over what happens inside the stadium compared to in Canada, where it's really the brewer that has the leverage.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you could go to the Jays affiliate, Buffalo Bisons, and they have a craft beer festival on their field. Like, it's a
Exactly.
better fan experience. You can get craft beer at Coors Field, for God's sake. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. There's
yeah,
no distributor in between the larger breweries in Canada and the licensees. well, if there is one, of course, it happens to be owned by the beer store. So,
Right.
although I love the beer store.
I know you do.
We love the beer store, but that it's just that just talking about what the structure is, right, and why you'll go across the border and have much better selection in these major golf.
Yeah. Yeah, the beer store. So that's that's an OCB issue that I've talked to smaller brewers before that have said they feel like the OCB has been largely um, committed to working within the system as opposed to changing the system. And one of the things I would hear is that small brewers didn't want to do business with the beer store, and they felt that the big guys like you and maybe Bose and Amsterdam wanted, you're doing quite well in the beer store, so there isn't a desire to shake that up. But I think it's kind of shaken itself up at this point. I mean, the beer store is hemorrhaging money. If you look at their financial reports, it looks like they took a $22 million loss this year or something.
Yeah, there's no question that grocery has affected that. I would go back to our earlier conversation with baseball and say that I've always felt that at the time when we started, I think 82% of consumers were buying their beer in the beer store.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, that has changed considerably, and the LCBO has done a great job of retailing beer. But for those consumers who are going in the beer store, shouldn't they get an opportunity to have a selection of craft beers? I mean, do we really, should craft breweries stand in the way of offering that selection? Unless we believe that change is going to come immediately. Now, I've always felt that, you work on change, but you work on your relationship as well. And we determined early going in Stumasol that we wanted to be available to those, at the time, 82% of beer consumers.
Mm-hmm.
So when we did this, you wouldn't believe it, Ben, like we had some people in craft beer were very upset with us and met with us and said, you need to pull out of the beer store. And then that's the way to fight the fight. And our argument is, no, that's not the way to fight the fight. The way to fight the fight is joining in lobbying. And look what happened with Kathleen Wynne. Suddenly there's more opportunity in the beer store and for craft breweries. So I think, and the truth is, again, I've been doing this since 1988. It's changed.
Mm-hmm.
But the beer store is still a major player. And a lot of people like to go there. In fact, I'll tell you right now, as we speak, Ben, beer store sales have really, really grown because the LCBO struggles with their lineups. Whereas the beer store has very few lineups, access to beer, and to the larger packs. Another political issue, the LCBO still to this day only allows consumers to buy 6-packs. So, you can dig into what's happening there, but the truth is, in an era where people want to make fewer shopping trips, a 2-4 is starting to make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And our sales reflect that. Now, a lot of craft breweries aren't in the beer store and or don't have 2-4s. So they are yet to be in a position to take advantage of consumer trends. But I'll finish by saying the consumer is so important. The consumer is in charge. The real change, I think, has been in opportunities with the grocery, for example, which is, am I mistaken? I think that was Kathleen Wynne as well, was it not?
Oh yeah. Well, no, you'll get. I think Kathleen Wynne did a lot for craft beer. I mean, as much as you can do when you're, beholden to some lobbyists. But yeah, I'm happy with groceries. But it was always a little weird to me that they handed the ability to open stores to a sort of a third party. When you have craft brewers that have been lobbying to be able to open their own stores for years, and then all of a sudden it was like, you can't sell your own product in the store, but Galen Weston can, for example. Like, I've always thought the way to blow up this market overnight is to let craft brewers open their own stores and let them cross-sell up to 50% other people's products. Then you could have one store away from your brewery. I mean, you're in downtown Toronto, so people come to you to buy beer, but a lot of people, they can't afford real estate in places with lots of foot traffic. But if they can have a store away from their brewery somewhere else, just have one store, and they can sell their buddies beers, the market would just be crazy overnight.
I love it. I think if the government is, I don't know what's going on there. One of the things is, the beer store is owned by the large brewers, and maybe they don't want to take steps where more of the stores are owned by brewers. But really,
I think that's exactly it.
Yeah. Fundamentally, you have a great idea. OCB has lobbied for that for a long time now, and someday, now that we're in our grocery stores, you got me excited about this, Ken. It's a great idea.
Good. Sweet. I'll take credit for it if it happens.
Absolutely.
So you guys are well positioned. I think, like, obviously the times being what they are, it's a little odd, but I mean, I think you're I think you've got a lot of potential with Steam Whistle, and I think it's definitely worth noting that Erica is now your brewmaster. Erica is a very talented brewmaster, great person. Uh, is there a design? I mean, you just said you're going to hold off on new beer creation, but to sort of let Erica develop some new beers, or is that like where do you think you coming back, a new brewmaster being named, like what does the future hold for Steam Whistle there?
Well, I'm really excited about Erica having that opportunity. She really deserves it. And she's worked for 10 years under two Czech brewmasters, which, as you can imagine, I'm sure wasn't easy for her. Learned so much, and she's so, I think she's really respected by the craft brewing community. And she was very involved in all those beers that we have developed since I left. Um, most of them are hers. I think, with the exception of, I don't know, Von Bugle. I think she was partnering with Merrick McCunda, or I think he came back to help with that. But yeah, she's done an incredible job. And so if we can do, listen, we can do whatever we want to do, really, in terms of next steps in beers, because we've got that team. And I want to mention one of the things about Erica becoming brewmaster is change for Steam Whistle. And I think we've matured in terms of the industry. Steam Whistle is in a position now where we don't really need to rely on these accredited Czech brewers to be here. Canada can stand on its own now. It's fabulous. Like, think about 20 years earlier, 25 years ago, how many really good brewmasters were there in Canada? Like, I'm telling you, there might have been 10.
Right.
And now so much experience has been brought to the industry as a result of the experimentation and then the consistency built in popular beers for each craft brewery. So, we're in a great position. Back to the COVID thing, we're all Canadian. Our brewmaster is Canadian, and I think it's just more local than ever. So yeah, we're well positioned to do whatever we need to do in terms of next steps with beer.
I could tell you candidly that more than one Steam Whistle employee emailed me to tell me that you were coming back because they were happy, and they'd seen me, obviously, the comments I had made around the purity seal and maybe suggesting Steam Whistle had lost its way. So people are excited that you're coming back, and they wanted me to know. So I'll leave that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's nice to hear that. But I think, my job when I come into work in the morning is to contribute to people's days, to make people, to make sure they're enjoying their work and that they are inspired by where we're going. And my theory always has been that if you're able to accomplish that as a leader, you'll go great places, you'll be competitive, you'll make money. All these things will fall into place. But you cannot forget that, the most important person in our business right now is not me talking to you on the phone, but whoever is working on the line right now, the brewers, the guys in filtration, the drivers. These people are essential. Without them, you would not be able to buy our product in the stores. And, because I started as a driver, Ben, that's the way I see the business.
Right.
It's those are the essential staff, and thank God for them. So if I'm bringing anything back to the business, that's what I'm bringing back. And I think that probably if you ask the people that were involved with seeing me come back, that's what they felt could improve.
Well, I'm excited to see what's next, man.
I'm excited myself. It's really nice to be back, and thanks for your consideration. It's good to catch up with people in the industry. And
yeah, well, thanks for doing the show. It'll be my first one, so no one will listen. Don't worry.
Right on. That's great.
But yeah, I appreciate it. And let's keep in touch. Say hi to Sybil for me.
I will. I'll definitely pass that along. And if you're in town, when things open up, come on down to the brewery. And I don't know if you've been to the beer garden, but
I haven't. I've heard great things.
No, we pour Steam Whistle Pilsner right off the bright beer tank. Nice. So it's really like the freshest beer, freshest Pilsner you can imagine. And so let's sit down in the beer market and catch up over the beer.
Well, do, man. As soon as baseball is back, I'll come to Toronto.
Can't wait. Can't wait for that.
Thanks for listening. Be sure and wash your hands.